Hi there, my name's Saskia Huntley and I'm an assistant psychologist and OCD counsellor at a private therapy clinic. I thought I'd make this video today about a little known subtype of OCD called ROCD, or Relationship OCD. Now, before we talk about ROCD, let's break down OCD for those who don't know. Obsessive compulsive disorder is an anxiety disorder featuring a pattern of unwanted thoughts, which are called obsessions, and they cause a lot of stress and anxiety, and then they lead to the performance of repetitive behaviours called compulsions, which are aimed at easing this anxiety caused by obsessions. Now, if you'd like to learn more about OCD in general, we have multiple OCD specific videos on our channel, so please do check that out if you want more information, because this video will be mainly about ROCD. So going back to OCD, when people think about OCD, they mainly think about things like compulsive hand washing or lock checking, often due to frequent media portrayals. However, there are multiple equally debilitating subtypes of OCD, where the symptoms are a lot more internal, so you can't really see them, and ROCD is one of these subtypes. So what is ROCD? ROCD stands for Relationship Obsessive Compulsive Disorder, and it's a subset of OCD which focuses on interpersonal relationships. People with ROCD experience distressing and unwanted obsessions which are kind of centered on the strength, the quality, and the essence of their interpersonal relationships and those involved in those relationships. Obsessions tend to kind of involve their most significant relationships to that individual, so romantic relationships, parent-child relationships, and individual God relationships can be involved in ROCD. And as with OCD, many people with ROCD report that their ROCD causes frequent and significant distress, and it negatively impacts their life. So that can include negatively impacting mood, anxiety, other OCD symptoms, and also obviously it can cause significant relationship issues as well. But unfortunately, the lack of knowledge surrounding ROCD and its often covert symptoms, it can frequently lead to misdiagnosis and a lot of misunderstanding as well. So in many cases, unaware friends, family, and even therapists can suggest things like, oh, you're just having relationship issues, or maybe you're just not into them. But actually, for people with ROCD, their worries and their obsessions significantly exceed normal relationship uncertainty, because sometimes you are just not that into them, but with ROCD that's just not the case. The resultant distress from these worries that they have often requires treatment from a trained professional who understands the nuances of ROCD. So this video, I thought, kind of would act as a beginner's guide to ROCD and outline the symptoms, the causes, the treatments, and hopefully that will help raise awareness of this specific type of OCD, and also highlight how ROCD is a lot more than just relationship issues. Like other forms of OCD, there is no one single cause for ROCD. There can be multiple risk factors involved which vary between individuals and affect them differently. But some of the factors that do make it more likely for a person to experience ROCD are family shared beliefs, biological causes, and critical incidents, which I'll explain in more detail now. So similar to other types of OCD, family shared beliefs about the importance of thoughts, uncertainty, and an inflated sense of responsibility are suggested to also increase sensitivity to ROCD as well as OCD. However, ROCD-specific studies additionally suggest that early parent-child relationships can encourage the development of dysfunctional beliefs about love and about relationships that predispose an individual to ROCD. Now, these dysfunctional beliefs make an individual more responsive and emotionally reactive to relationship worries, so that increases their sensitivity to ROCD. And some examples of these dysfunctional beliefs about love and relationships can include obsessions and dysfunctional beliefs about being in the wrong relationship. So for an example, someone could say, well, if if my relationship isn't completely perfect, my partner is unlikely to be the one, and therefore I must be in the wrong relationship. So that's an example of a kind of dysfunctional belief about being in the wrong relationship. Another belief is about love. So that can include things like, if I don't think about my partner or my child or God all the time, then it means that I probably don't really love them. That's another dysfunctional belief. And another one is about breakups. So that can include thoughts like, I think breaking up is one of the worst things that can happen. So those are some examples about dysfunctional beliefs that can increase a person's sensitivity to ROCD. So problems with neurotransmitters, for example, serotonin and norepinephrine, they have been linked as one biological factor which can predispose individuals to developing OCD, and it's actually been linked to ROCD as well. So that's one biological factor. There is a lot less evidence for the prevalence of genetic factors in the development of ROCD and OCD. There may be some genes which predispose people to developing disorders in general, but no specific genes have been identified which increase sensitivity to ROCD or OCD. So genetics are less of a factor, but biological factors have been linked to ROCD and OCD as well. Stresses or challenges represent a particularly prevalent role in the onset of ROCD and OCD as well. For some, ROCD symptoms occur after the end of a romantic relationship. So often these individuals are obsessing over losing the one, and they fear that no future relationship will ever measure up. For others, they report that ROCD symptoms began after facing their first kind of commitment related decisions. So that's things like living together, possible marriage, children, relationship exclusivity, decisions about that kind of stuff. So those are some kind of critical incidents that have been linked to the onset of ROCD. Now, I realise that a lot of these kind of risk factor examples have been explained within a romantic context. This is the relationship dynamic where ROCD is most frequently experienced. However, critical incidences, biological factors, and family shared beliefs have all been linked to the ROCD experience within a parent-child dynamic and an individual God dynamic as well. So ROCD is a relatively new research area. So new risk factors specific to each of those dynamics can't be fully investigated in this video. However, I do recommend you do some research if you want to find more risk factors specific to parent-child relationships and individual God relationships, because they're continually being suggested, and I recommend you read into the research by Guy Doron, because he's doing some really great research at the moment, and it will be kind of continually suggesting new risk factors, new symptoms specific to each dynamic. So this video will mainly focus on romantic relationship examples, but I will try to include some individual God and child examples, parent-child examples too. ROCD presents differently for different people. However, in most cases, ROCD symptoms can be broken down into two subtypes. That's relationship-centered ROCD symptoms and partner-focused ROCD symptoms. So for relationship-centered symptoms, obsessions tend to kind of focus and center on the feelings that a person has towards their partner, or their partner's feelings, and also the rightness of the relationship. So in essence, worries and obsessions that are focused on the relationship kind of point to relationship-centered ROCD symptoms. On the other hand, partner-focused ROCD symptoms, that's where obsessions are more focused on kind of perceived flaws of the relationship partner. So a person with experiencing ROCD, they often report feelings of love and feelings of caring for that person, but they may question a partner's or a child's kind of attractiveness, their intelligence, and lots of other different qualities, even if this doesn't seem rational. So in some cases, I know that there's been a case of a woman who'd been married to a doctor, but she had partner-focused symptoms of ROCD, and she knew he was intelligent. She really loved him, and she said he's definitely intelligent because he's a doctor. However, she kept having these worries and obsessions about his intelligence and that it wasn't up to par. So that's kind of an example of partner-focused ROCD symptoms that just don't seem rational. And a person with ROCD can experience one or both of these subsets of symptoms. They're not mutually exclusive, and in actual cases, they can actually reinforce each other as well. So many individuals with ROCD report initially having obsessions and worries of a perceived flaw in their partner that they can't get past. They're preoccupied with it, and then that encouraged worries about how right the relationship was, or if they were the one. And obviously this can happen vice versa as well. And additionally, ROCD is often comorbid with other disorders, so other anxiety symptoms, kind of other OCD symptoms, depression, and stuff like that. So to avoid misdiagnosis, it's really important for the therapist to gain a solid understanding of a person's symptoms when they have ROCD within the current relationship they're in, that they're experiencing it with, so if it's a parent-child or a romantic relationship, but also their other relationships as well in the past relationships. And that's really important to help with kind of diagnosis. And avoid misdiagnosis. And these symptoms will include obsessions, compulsions, and also any avoidance or safety behaviours, which I'm going to go into a little bit more now and explain. So let's start with obsessions. Now, obsessions are repetitive and persistent thoughts, images, impulses, urges that pop intrusively and unwanted into a person's mind, and they could provoke feelings of anxiety, of guilt, and of shame due to their often unpleasant and inappropriate nature. And ROCD intrusions can be particularly kind of distressing because they often contradict what a person really feels. So like I said, you can feel real feelings of love with this person, but have doubts about the relationship. You can't stop doubting the relationship. So that contradicts those obsessions contradict that person's feelings, but they can also contradict their values and their beliefs as well. So for many people, they think that appearance shouldn't really matter in a relationship, but obsessions about perceived flaws in that relationship, that person's attractiveness, can kind of contradict this belief. So that can cause significant distress. These are the kinds of obsessions. And obsessions do tend to follow common themes in ROCD, which have been mentioned. So the obsessions can tend to be in a romantic nature, parent-child nature, or a individual God kind of focus. So I'll give some more examples. So romantic obsessions in ROCD tend to focus on a thought like, what if I don't really love my partner? The individual is usually obsessed with doubts about the relationship, or, as I said before, perceived flaws of the partner. Common obsessions, examples in romantic ROCD include things like, what if I don't really love my partner? As I said, are they the one? Is this true love? What if there's a better match for me? And those tend to be kind of more relationship-centered symptoms and relationship-centered obsessions. Or on the perceived flaw side of things, it will be things like, I don't think my partner's attractive enough, or social enough, or intelligent enough, or moral enough. And that's more partner-focused symptoms. There can also be thoughts like, what if I'm leading my partner on because I have these feelings that they might not be the one, and then that makes me a bad person because I'm leading them on and not telling them that I don't really love them, or because I might not really love them. So that's another kind of obsession that comes up quite a lot in a romantic context. And also, they don't have to just be thoughts, they can be urges as well, as I said. So you can have an urge to leave your current partner, and that kind of pops into your head intrusively as well. So those are some common examples of obsessions in a romantic context. But they can also occur within a parent-child context as well. Parents often report that their child's happiness and kind of success is their most important aim in life. But for people with ROCD, this can kind of become associated with preoccupation and worry about perceived deficits in their child, which are interpreted as potentially kind of stopping that child's ability to achieve happiness and success. So this can obviously become kind of really distressing for a parent, and also cause difficulty with just enjoying being with the child. Now, ongoing research is investigating this parental-child presentation of ROCD a lot more in depth. So definitely, if you want to learn more, read into kind of the research, as I mentioned, by Guy Doron. But just to give you some kind of examples of parent-child obsessions, it can be things like, I'm anxious for my child all the time because I worry that they don't look as good as other children, or I worry that they're not kind of as intelligent as other children, or they're not as moral as other children. That's one that comes up a lot. Or things like, I'm worried my child doesn't have the potential to succeed. And obviously this all can include, it causes a lot of parental distress. And so that's why it's really important for us to do more research into kind of parent-child ROCD, so they have more ability to enjoy being with the child. But those are just some common obsession examples that within that parent-child context. And finally, another theme of relationship obsessions occurs within an individual God context. And this is particularly for those practicing monotheistic religions, because that one's relationship with God is highly important in these religions. So ROCD symptoms within an individual God context tend to focus around kind of one's relationship with God, one's feeling towards God, and as well as obsessions relating to religious behaviour. So some common examples include, is my love of God strong enough? There's something wrong with the way that I observe God's laws. That's quite a common one. And is my relationship with God truthful? That's quite a common one as well. So those are some examples of obsessions relating to the individual God context. And there are so many other obsession examples within all three of the themes that I mentioned. However, they can't obviously fully be explored in this video. But the common thread is that when someone has one of these obsessions, it causes quite a lot of anxiety and distress. And in order to kind of relieve this stress, they try to suppress it or neutralize it with another thought or action. So compulsions are the repetitive actions, rituals, or behaviours that one does in response to obsessions, and they do it in order to relieve anxiety or uncertainty caused by these obsessions. Compulsions can be external, so they can be visible to the outside world, or they can be internal, so things done in one's own mind. Many people with ROCD realise that their compulsions and their behaviours are not productive, or they're not rational, but they still feel compelled to carry them out anyway. So I'll give you some examples of some compulsions now. So the common themes tend to be overt, like I said, external, avoidant compulsions, mental compulsions, and reassurance-seeking compulsions. So I'll give you some examples of each now. So moreover, external compulsions will be things like having sex with your partner in order to check for arousal or love feelings. It can be like repeatedly confessing to your partner that you found someone attractive, or you're having doubts about the relationship. That'll be like a compulsive kind of repeated confession. Things like writing pros and cons lists of your relationship. That's quite a common overt compulsion that people have in ROCD. And also kind of testing your feelings by flirting with others, or kind of seeking out others to test your feelings about your current relationship. So those are quite external, overt compulsions. Now, the more mental ones, which often cause misdiagnosis, and that's why it makes it hard to kind of diagnose ROCDs, because it's so internal a lot of the time. So these mental compulsions involve things like mentally comparing your partner or your child's attractiveness, their emotional stability with others. So whatever the perceived flaw that you have, that is your obsession, you often mentally compare that to other people. And it can be mentally comparing it to movies as well, or love songs, or romantic novels. So that's another quite common compulsion that people do mentally. You can mentally review past relationships and compare them to your current one. And another one that's quite nuanced to ROCD is creating a test in your head, and then kind of just continuing with the relationship regardless of the test results. So this would be something like, okay, if he truly loves me, he will cancel plans with his friends right now. And that's like a compulsion of creating these tests, and then regardless of the outcome, doing another test and then creating another test. So that's quite a common mental compulsion. Another type of a theme of compulsion, is avoidant. So that'll be things like avoiding partners, ex-partners, or people that you find attractive, because it's quite triggering and can trigger obsessions that you don't really love your partner, because you found this other person attractive. So you tend to avoid those people. Another avoidant compulsion can be avoiding being intimate with your partner. Now that can be physically, so having sex, or it could be verbally as well, just saying I love you. And a lot of the time people perform this kind of avoidant compulsion in order to stop and in order to not to further entangle themselves within that relationship. That's what people often say. So those are some common kind of avoidant compulsions. And then finally we have reassurance seeking compulsions, and that will be things like asking family or friends how long you think your relationship will last, asking family or friends kind of how much they think your partner's attractive or intelligent or sociable. Kind of like I said, whatever the perceived flaw of your obsession is, that's the thing you probably focus on asking your family and friends. And then another one would be like compulsively asking your friends or anyone else about their relationship and then comparing yours to that. So those are some kind of common compulsion themes within ROCD. But although they do lead to a short-term kind of reduction in anxiety, in the long term they increase preoccupation with the obsession, and they reinforce anxiety. So, and as well as uncertainty about the relationship. So consequently, ROCD can negatively impact both the individual but also their relationship as well, through obviously frequent misunderstandings, conflicts and breakups as well, particularly through these compulsions. As I mentioned earlier on in this video, there are many misunderstandings surrounding ROCD, and it's due to its complex nature and it's a relatively new research base. So it's understandable that the symptoms of ROCD can often be kind of misinterpreted as relationship issues, and that's often done by family and friends, but it is also done by therapists that aren't trained within OCD specifically and don't understand the nuances of kind of OCD subtypes like ROCD. But what I want to note in this video particularly is that kind of experiences similar to ROCD symptoms can absolutely be part of a normal relationship, and the course of a normal relationship, because fluctuations or changes in love and feelings of love and attraction are absolutely normal and inevitable in a relationship. So I want to highlight that no one example of the compulsions or obsessions I've given in this video, no one example is actually kind of abnormal or unhealthy, because they can also be parts of like normal relationship issues like fear of intimacy, fear of abandonment, insecurity, that kind of thing. But what's really important to remember is when obsessions and compulsions turn into a repetitive, time-consuming cycle that just causes significant distress and it's really affecting the relationships around someone's in an individual's life,